episode of the Church of the Templar Mormon, and I hope you've enjoyed my previous videos, and we're going to delve a little more into how the church came about. A while back I was flipping through the channels on my TV, and I came across an interesting show called America Unearthed. It was a show on History Channel, and it was a show about this guy, Scott Walters, who was a forensic geologist. Went around America, the United States, and he would find these sites which traditional archaeologists have ignored for some reason, usually because they don't fit into the established theory. And he would show and give his theory of what these sites meant. I had seen shows before that talked about different groups coming to America, about who these groups could have been and when they came, and this was a lot like this show did. And I found this show very interesting. Probably dating back to my youth, learning about the Book of Mormon and about supposed Book of Mormon sites. So I was kind of curious about pre-Columbian contact with the old world and what evidence they had, and what groups could have come. So I found it a very interesting show, and I found myself waiting each week for a new episode to come out because I was interested in what he had to show. And as the show progressed, more and more episodes were devoted to supposed Knights Templars coming to America and hiding their secrets here in America to protect them from the Catholic Church and European powers, which of course were trying to kill them and take their treasure and take their property. So they had supposedly come to America and hid these things, and they were supposedly quite well versed in America and knew their way around and hid things here in America. And according to Scott Walters, he says that the Templars used to call the Americas the New Jerusalem, and that kind of pricked my ears because I recognize that term. Someone else used to call America the New Jerusalem, or refer to the New Jerusalem being here in America, and that was Joseph Smith Jr. Well, I was well acquainted with Joseph Smith Jr. and knew a lot of teachings. So I was quite interested in what did they mean by the New Jerusalem? What were they saying? So this kind of interested me, and I, like I said, I enjoyed the show, but unfortunately the show's not on anymore. But it was very interesting. And it kind of made me wondering, how did, the Knights Templars and Joseph Smith both come up with this idea that the New Jerusalem was in America? Was it just a coincidence? Was it just two disparate groups come up with the same idea? Or was there a connection? Was the Knights Templars or their intellectual proteges, the Masons, somehow connected with the Mormons? It was an interesting idea which I wanted to look into a little further. around this same time, I had come across this bit of information which kind of surprised me, that the United States Postal Service, they collect, whenever someone moves, they fill out a card and they mail it to the post office, and they send all that information to Salt Lake City, Utah. And that is all stored on their computers in Salt Lake City, Utah. Now, the Postal Service claims they only keep these records for 18 months, but from what I know about the federal government and my talking to the federal government, they never destroy anything. They keep these records, they archive them and keep them basically forever. So you got the post office has all these move informations, which they, of course, would need to deliver mail. They need to know where people are at and be able to find them. But at the same time, or also going on in Salt Lake City, Utah, is you got the National Security Agency, the NSA, had just built a large facility outside of Salt Lake City, Utah, where they store all this supposed metadata on all our telephone calls and all our emails. Of course, they say it's just the metadata, which is just the information like where the calls go to, how long was it, was the length of it and stuff like that. They claim they don't keep the actual phone calls or emails. Well, we know from Edward Snowden, who you may have heard of in the news, he says that they not only keep the metadata, they have the actual phone calls and the actual emails in storage there in Salt Lake City, Utah. So they know not only who you called, but what you said. And, it's not just, calls to foreign countries as they would like to have us believe, but according to Edward Snowden, it's every phone call and every message, that's made in the United States. And as I've mentioned in previous episodes, I got my credit card bill in the mail and noticed it comes from Salt Lake City. And, and I knew that the credit card companies have records of everything you've ever bought with a credit card. They have stored and archived, and they can look it up if the court so determines that they need that information. They can look it up going back years, what you've bought and everything you've bought with a credit card. So you have, and of course you have the Mormons in Salt Lake City. They, for their genealogy, they keep every birth certificate, every death certificate, every marriage certificate, every divorce certificate. They have all this vital area that they store, which they claim is for their genealogy research. They keep it all in a mountain, great big mountain vault there outside of Salt Lake City, Utah. So you have the Mormons keeping records of every person ever born in the United States. You got the post office keeping records of every place a person lives in the United States. You got the NSA keeping records of every phone call and every email you've made in the United States. And you got the credit card companies keeping records of everything you buy with a credit card. Now that we have debit cards, which are essentially credit cards, they have those records too. So even if you say, oh, well, I don't use my credit card to buy something, I use my debit card, they got records of that too. They know what you bought. So they know what you bought. They know a lot about you. They can piece together quite a bit about you from this information. So all of this is in Salt Lake City, Utah. Now, why is that? Is Salt Lake City, Utah such a great place to store things, and that's why everybody stores it there? Or is there some other reason why they're all connected there in Salt Lake City? You know, you have the Mormon Church, but I mean, does the Mormon Church wield that kind of power to be able to bring all that stuff together? Or is there something else that kind of overshadows all of those agencies, including the Mormon Church, that can have control over all this information? Well, anyway, going back to what I started this on, America on Earth, the TV show with Scott Walters. You know, I was so interested in what that was saying, I got his book. It's called Akhenaten to the Founding Fathers by Scott Walters. And it was a very interesting book, and it went through basically everything that was in the show, and it told how the show came about, and he talks about a lot of the sites he talked about in the shows, but he goes into much more detail and has colored pictures, but he goes into a lot more detail about the Knights Templars and their Masonic connection, and what does it actually all mean, or what he thinks it all means. He never mentions the Mormon Church or Joseph Smith. I guess he sees no connection there, or I know he knows about them because he's very connected to this magazine called Ancient Americas or something like this, and I've read this magazine, and it contains a lot of stuff by Mormons, because Mormons are very concerned about ancient America, looking for Book of Mormon connections with ancient Americans. So they're very interested, and they write a lot of articles that are in this magazine, which Scott Walters also writes articles for. So I'm sure he's acquainted with them, even though he doesn't mention them in his book. And his concern is about the bloodline from Jesus and Mary Magdalene, that the Templars had to hide this, and they probably hid evidence of it in America, and kept this information with the Masons and transmitted it down through the Masons to modern times. After reading this book, I thought he made a very compelling argument, but it was all circumstantial. So, is circumstantial evidence enough? Well, you know that courts of law have convicted people of murder and sent them to the gas chamber or the electric chair, whatever they use now, chemicals. But anyway, people have been convicted using circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial evidence could be very compelling and very persuasive. So even though all this evidence, and we'll discuss more later, all this is only circumstantial, after a while the circumstantial evidence starts to build up and starts to become convincing. And we'll talk about that all in more videos to come. So I'd like to thank you for watching this video, and hope you'll come back and watch some more. You can join my channel, Dr. Rick, and of course you're welcome to donate to keep this tree going. This is the Church of the Temple of Mormon. I'm Dr. Rick, and thank you very much for watching.